Section 3.4, example 9, finding the domain of composite functions involving radicals. So find the domain of f of g of x, where f of x is equal to x, or the square root of x plus 2. G of x is equal to the square root of 3 minus x. So just like before, let's look at g of x first, because that's our input. So starting from the inside, working our way out. So for g of x, we're going to look for the domain. So with the domain of a radical, we're looking for values that are larger than 0 here, or positive numbers inside the radical. So we're saying that 3 minus x should be greater than or equal to 0. So let's subtract 3 from both sides. We have negative x is greater than or equal to negative 3. And to get rid of that negative, I'm just going to multiply by a negative 1. Because we multiply by a negative number, we have to switch the direction of the sign. So x is now less than or equal to a positive 3. So x is less than or equal to positive 3. So we have all the values of x that are smaller than 3. So if we were to put this on a number line, you would say that all values smaller than 3. We could have a closed circle because 0 is included in that. The square root of 0 is still going to be 0, but that's what we have in there. And now, including those values, what we're going to look for are outputs which make this greater than 0. So now the domain of, so for f of x, so domain is going to be numbers that are positive inside of this square root. So x plus 2 has to be greater than or equal to 0. So here x has to be greater than or equal to negative 2. So for these values, we're looking at negative 2 and all numbers greater than that. But now looking at the output of this really doesn't make too much sense, right? It looks like the only numbers that we're going to be able to use if we combine these two are going to be like just from negative 2 up to 3. But if you look at all of these values, what we're actually looking at is the function of f of g of x, where the input ends up being greater than or equal to negative 2. All of the outputs of g of x are positive numbers already, and all positive numbers are greater than or equal to negative 2. So it's given that all of these are going to output positive numbers. So let me kind of demonstrate this. So all values from here will output positive numbers. So when we input it into f of x, we're inputting all values that are greater than or equal to negative 2. So because positive numbers are all greater than or equal to negative 2, so all positive numbers live in this value here. I know it's pretty difficult to see, so let's actually just find the composition of these two functions, f of g of x. That will make a lot more sense when explaining this. So f of g of x, we're looking at the function f of x, inputting the function g of x. So f of x, we're inputting the function g of x, which is the square root of 3 minus x. So the square root of 3 minus x. And now for our function f of x, it's a square root of our input plus 2. So f of x is the square root of our input plus 2. And our input here is our square root of 3 minus x. So now looking at these values here, we're just looking at what makes this work here. So if we were to drop the parentheses, we have the square root of 3 minus x plus 2. We're saying that all of these numbers have to be positive. So the domain here is going to be the square root of 3 minus x plus 2 is greater than or equal to 0. So now looking at this, we have the square root of 3 minus x is greater than or equal to negative 2. This value, we've already restricted the domain to be numbers less than 3. So that way these numbers, we could take the square root of them. And when we take square root of numbers, we're ending up with positive numbers anyway. So all of these are going to be positive numbers. So positive numbers. So positive numbers which are already greater than or equal to negative 2. Any positive number is going to be greater than negative 2 naturally because of it. So because we've already restricted our domain here, we just leave that as our domain. So domain, kind of looking back up here, we restricted it to say less than, or yeah, so numbers less than or equal to a positive 3. So the domain overall, so domain of f of g of x, that's going to be from negative infinity up to 3, which is what we have right up here. Again, I know it's a bit confusing, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, bye.